So he's sitting in Nigeria. You have an indictment, arrest warrant out for him. Were you involved at all with Desmond's negotiations with the State Department? And was that you part of
I
that?
was working independently of Desmond, and there were some things that, in addition to what Desmond were doing, I left the court in July of 2005. But when I came back, I was still actively engaged in the international community, and I still had my informants calling me and advising me on what's going on, and I still stayed in constant contact with members on Capitol Hill. And in addition to what Desmond was doing, and I had shared some of this information with my successors that took over from me in the court, but I acted independently as well. And one of the things that we knew was that I had met with Ellen Johnson Sirleaf after she got elected. She was trying to get access to Congressman Wolf, couldn't get access to Congressman Wolf because he doesn't like to meet with heads of state. And she was newly elected president.
Why would
she wanted some funding.
Okay.
And her personal lobbyist had
Just for the
contacted
tape that she was the the newly elected head of Liberia.
Newly elected and first woman president in Liberia. And this was in November, December timeframe of 2005. After she was elected, she came back to Washington. Reva Levinson, who was her designated lobbyist in Washington, contacted me. I knew Reva quite well. And she said she was trying to get in to see Frank. And I said, well, the only way that he will meet with her is if she formally requests that Charles Taylor, Nigeria, turn over Charles Taylor. And she says, well, I don't. I said, well, I'm just telling you right now, Frank Wolf will not meet with her. Number one, he doesn't like doing it. But number two, he won't do that knowing that there's going to be any U.S. tax dollars that's going to be spent in Liberia with the potential of this man that could come back and destabilize the region when she hasn't done everything legally and humanly possible to prevent this. And I said, so I've already had this discussion with him. And she said, well, let me talk to her. So she said, will you meet with her? So I met with her. I met with her over at the Russell Building, and I met with her privately with Reva. And I said, I will do my best to get a meeting with you. She was leaving the next day. She was going to meet Condoleezza Rice. And I said, I will meet with Frank. And I said, but I'm telling you, here's what's going to happen to get access to him. And you're going to have to meet it, because if you send a letter to Obasanjo and tell him that you don't mean it, I've got contacts in Nigeria that I will find out that you didn't mean it. Oh, no, I'll do that. So I called Frank, and he agreed. She had a meeting with Congressman Smith the next day at 10 o'clock in his office. I called Congressman Royce, who was one of our biggest supporters. He used to be the chairman of the African Subcommittee, and now he'd been moved to the chairman of Global Operations and Anti-Terrorism, but had just vacated that. And Chris Smith, who is now the chairman of the African Subcommittee from New Jersey, she had a meeting with him. Frank, who was more senior to them, agreed to go to that meeting. I was at the meeting. I did not go in. I stayed outside. Reva didn't go inside. And Frank told her that the only way that he would appropriate any money for her was if she did that. And she ended up getting $50 million appropriated to Liberia for project. But she delivered on the letter, so Obasanjo had that, so that was already started. And then she took office officially. She was inaugurated in January. Her first official act was to send her letter down to Nigeria. I had been receiving information that Benjamin Yatan, who I must admit I was still consumed with this, because Dave and I both felt that if we didn't bring Charles Taylor in at the court, it was only a 70% solution for the people of Sierra Leone, because at the end of the day, he was the Al Capone of West Africa. He was the Kakatua, they call him, the big fish. So I continued to work that. I worked with the State Department, let people know back here, as well as the UN, that there was the word that I got back, and even some state security service agents that I worked with in Nigeria who reported regularly about what Charles Taylor was doing, that he was going to be let go. If Ellen sent him that letter, he was going to be let go. And he would remind the international community that you asked me to take him, and I did, but he was always free to leave. He's not under arrest. You can go back, you can look at that. He's made that very clear. And so the intelligence that we got was that Benjamin Yatan was in Togo and Cameroon, and what he was going to do was Taylor was going to be released up by the Cameroon border area, and then Benjamin Yatan, who was his director of Special Security Service, was going to take him back to the Nimba Forest area where there was a large cache of weapons, which during the DDR, the demobilization and disarming, they had just moved him across the border. And there were many reports confirming that there was a significant cache of weapons, and also on the other side of the in the Guinea, because it's a no man's land out there, and it's a forest region. Nobody goes up there. So to make a long story short, we received that information. We let the right people know at State Department to be aware of this. It's going to happen in the next 2 months, and lo and behold, simultaneously, I get a call in the middle of the night that he's on his way. He's headed up to Cameroon, to the border. The guys are taking him up. I make a call back to Congressman Royce, Congressman Wolf, and even Smith's office. Congressman Royce and Congressman Smith immediately call the White House and let them know that Obasanjo, who is en route, has just let Charles Taylor go. And they said, you can't meet with him. He's just let him go. Okay. They contact Henry Hyde, who's the chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee. They prepare a letter. Check it out. There's a letter. The three of them sign it. They fax it to the White House saying Charles Taylor's en route. You can't, or President Obasanjo's en route. He's let Charles Taylor go. You can't meet with him until he tells you where he is. That's part of the rest of the story. And what I was told was that Obasanjo was inbound and had landed, and he had gotten the word that Bush is not going to meet with him until he tells him where Taylor is. And he said, pick him up. And he was picked up. And Benjamin Yatan was on the other side waiting for him in Cameroon. So that's what my sources tell me. That's the fact pattern. There were other things going on, which I had no knowledge of, that was being done independent. But these were things that I continually stayed active in after I left. So that's, and doesn't matter how he got brought in, but he got brought in, and the rest is the rest is history.
You've lived an incredible 10 years here with the Sierra Leone Tribunal, but also specifically Charles Taylor.
Well, I would be, certainly I'm happy for the people of Sierra Leone, but I'm happy for the people that work for the court, because the people that dedicated their lives to this court sacrificed a lot. But at the end of the day, this was ultimately it was about showing the international community that nobody is above the law, which is what you heard. And that really became paramount. You read about it, you hear about it, you see movies about it, but I was fixated on this guy. Even after I left, my wife just said, let me know when this guy is brought to jail, then I'll know you're back, because my head was still in the game. If I hadn't been married for as long as I had, I'm sure my wife wouldn't have supported me, but that's all she heard about was Charles Taylor. Charles, I got to get this guy. I got to get, just totally fixated. And so now it's almost anticlimactic, but it's great because now there will be others that will try. You're never going to stop this, but at least we've made an example out of one who was a very sophisticated, smart, intellectual guy, educated back in the U.S., Bentley College, had some very close ties to the U.S. government at one point in time, was very savvy, and had the support of virtually every African leader, even the ones that feared him. They supported him and admired what he was able to do. So that was a win for international justice, and I hope we can build on it. I hope the fact that we're able to bring him to justice will now give Fatu the courage, and I hope she can pressurize the international community to bring the likes of al-Bashir to justice, because this is one that I was glad to be a part of.